Execution dependencies provide powerful and flexible functionality that determine when a rule will execute its logic and subsequently trigger other rules to execute. In this video, we will cover execution dependencies using either the after or every options. First, the basics. The red dot on the left-hand side of the rule is called the execution input port. If a rule has one, then it must have an execution statement defined in the execution dependency logic section of the rule in order to execute. An execution statement is either an after or every statement. Execution dependencies can also have condition statements that use the if option. We will cover these in a separate video. You can easily recognize whether a rule is not configured to execute by looking for rules that do not have a red execution link connecting to their execution input port. You can hide or show links using the toggle button to help you find these orphaned rules. Some rules do not require an execution input port if they are triggered by external events, such as streaming data like the price data rule, or trade updates like the trade monitor. State rules such as the account state data rule are executed by both price update events and trade update events. Now, let's have a closer look at how to use an execution dependency with the after option. An after statement does exactly what you expect. The place trades rule will execute immediately after. The 3 green candles logic rule has successfully executed. When an after execution dependency is used in an execution dependency expression, the referenced rule only needs to execute once for the condition to be satisfied. For example, when adding the execution conditions, after 3 green candles, and after 3 candles greater than 4 pips, each condition only needs to have executed once for the place trades rule to trigger. This means that if the 3 green candles rule executes, but the 3 candles greater than 4 pips does not, the place trade rule will not execute. However, if the next candle event triggers the 3 candles greater than 4 pips rule to execute, but the 3 green candles rule is not triggered, then the place trade rule will now execute, as now both rules in the execution dependencies have executed successfully once, although not triggered by the same candle event. Now that both after statements have been satisfied, if another candle event triggers either the 3 green candles rule or the 3 candles greater than 4 pips rules, then the place trades rule would execute again. This is not the behavior we want here, but highlights an important concept to understand. Each statement in an execution dependency expression should be viewed as an independent event, regardless of the time the event occurred. When you want to ensure the execution dependency statements are synchronized in time, there are 2 approaches. Logical chaining of rules, by sequencing rules in a chain using execution dependencies, where each rule triggers the next. This ensures a clear, ordered progression of logic in a serial execution path. The second approach is to use the Synchronise feature. When this is configured, an additional check is done to ensure all statements in an execution dependency expression have been met within a defined time window from the latest triggering rule's execution. For instance, if the 3 green candles condition is triggered, then the 3 candles greater than 4 pips must also be triggered within 1 second for the expression to be satisfied. This would only happen if both conditions are triggered by the latest 1-minute candle data. As a safeguard, trading rules are disabled after a single execution by default in order to avoid repeated triggering of trading actions unintentionally. This can be updated using the enabled switch in the after execution section, allowing the place trades rule to now execute again when the execution dependencies are triggered again. Next, let's look at the every statement. This operates in exactly the same way as the after statement when used as a single execution dependency. There is a key distinction when it is used in an expression, and every statement requires the referenced rule to execute each time the target rule is to be executed. In other words, if both the 3 green candles rule and the 3 candles greater than 4 pips rule had executed once, then both would need to execute at least one more time to trigger the place trades rule to execute a second time. Unlike the after statement, which remains true once the execution dependency rule has executed, the every option is set back to false after the target rule executes and requires a minimum of 1 additional execution of the dependency for the expression to evaluate to true again. If the 3 green candles rule executes 3 more times before the 3 candles greater than 4 pips rule executes again, then the place trades rule will execute once more, and then both dependency rules will need to execute again to trigger the place trades to execute again. Note that using the every option will still require the rules to be synchronized or chained to ensure that they are triggered by the same candle event. Now, let's look at another fundamental concept of the rules engine and understand how an external event will trigger the execution of rules that then traverse the various possible execution paths in a strategy. The simple principle to remember is breadth before depth when it comes to executing rules. This means that all the immediate rule dependencies will execute before any of their children descendants will execute. This is repeated for each rule in an execution path. There is a guaranteed order in which rules will execute if there are two or more rules that are triggered by the same parent rule. The execution order is displayed next to the execution output port of each rule that is downstream from a selected rule in the strategy. This provides a simple visualization to identify the relative execution order of rules that are triggered by the same external event, but are in different execution paths. Watch out for longer rule chains feeding data into shorter rule chains, where both execution paths are triggered by the same external data event or time schedule. The rule receiving data input from the longer chain will execute on data that is out of date, unless you update the strategy design. The execution order will help you identify these types of issues.